Great. So with that, I'm going to briefly go over the agenda really quickly, and then I'll introduce Nancy Taggart to give us some welcoming remarks here. So we'll do some welcome and introductions, a little bit of a network overview, the YP2LE network itself. Then we'll kind of jump into what is the WORQ tool, why we're kind of moving into this discussion group to utilize and further understand and engage with the WORQ tool. And then we'll kind of talk about what participation we want through the discussion group and how we kind of want to move things forward. And like I said, then we'll have a quick Q&A at the end and probably a little bit of open discussion with everyone who is here joining us. And I will hand it over to Nancy.
Thanks so much, Cole. Hi, everyone. Nice to see some of names I know and some names I don't. My name is Nancy Taggart, and I am a senior youth and workforce advisor in the Education Center at USAID in Washington. And I am delighted to be a part of this, albeit briefly, because I need to jump off and join a training or resume a training that I'm in. But I really wanted to be a part of the first meeting, the kickoff meeting, and I will be participating as we go forward in this group because the WORQ tool and set of tools really is an important product and investment that we have made in the Education Center over the past several years. And I was really happy to be a part of that process over the first 2 or 3 years. And it was a long process. And I know some folks on the call like John, Lindsay have been a part of that in as we were engaging implementers and other donors and USAID missions to help shape the concept and to feed into key issues and considerations as we were developing the toolkit. So this really represents an important investment, as I said, to help better and capture the results that we're hopefully contributing to related to earnings and employment for youth who are a very special and unique cohort that we target through USAID programming. So I know that my colleagues are going to get into more of the details on the background of why we developed the tool, but very happy to be here and really look forward to your participation to help guide us as we're implementing this toolkit, and so that we can learn from how it's working in implementation and improve it and hear that feedback to help share out the data from the use of the tool to inform our programming going forward. So I'm very excited to have you all participate. So thank you so much. I am going to hand it over to Jessie, I believe, to kind of talk through a little bit more about the YouthPower Learning Network, because she is our community manager. Jessie, over to you.
Thanks, Nancy. So just to frame up where this group is sitting and why we're here as a discussion group. So this overall, the YouthPower Learning Network overall, we went through a process of co-designing last year, understanding what were the things that members really wanted and needed to be able to be a vibrant and effective community that met their needs. And so we identified a set of guiding principles for this network overall. And these are them. And really what we want to make sure that we do in all of our work with members is to ensure that we're fostering opportunities for meaningful connection and conversation. So not just having information come your way, but being able to engage with it. And so this discussion group is an example of that. And we want to ensure that. And then being able to help people understand how, when, and where to participate. So what does engagement look like, how to receive feedback, how to have meaningful conversation, and then ensure that you're able to get, that we create and curate practical resources. So this is, again, a good example of that. Here's a tool that's useful, and we want to create a forum that's accessible for people to engage and make that forum accessible broadly, globally, and to particularly youth, Global South, and then trying to create opportunities for those who speak languages other than English to engage as well. And we've built into this network opportunities for member agency, so feedback, really wanting to be member-led, and then flexibility in the structure itself so that we can adjust as we hear different needs, and empowering people within the network to speak up and play the role of champion. So these are sort of our guiding principles, and we endeavor to adhere to them through all of the efforts we do throughout communities of practice and discussion groups and across the wider network. Next slide, please. So our goals, these principles are supporting goals of being able to collect and disseminate PYD resources across all the different platforms that we have, the COPs, discussion groups, and then the websites themselves, to create a space for customizing or developing new resources and developing small groups to be able to support that. And this is a very good example of that. We have a resource and we want to be able to test it and understand it better. So we have a more intimate group setting that allows for more meaningful engagement. And then engaging with others in applied learning. And this is something that may show up a little bit more in some of the other COPs that are not as focused topic-wise, where they want to create the space to focus a little bit more and have that discussion. And then last but not least, being able to build connections and relationships. So how to connect with others who have similar affinities, or are interested in similar things. Next slide. So these are a lot of different pieces. How do they all fit together? This is a little bit of a visual to make sense of that. So at the center is sort of the community as we think of YouthPower Learning Network. And then we have communities of practice. So those black diamonds. And then out of those may end up smaller working groups. This is a working group that's not connected to a COP, so you might see that a little bit separately. And then there are some affinity groups, which we haven't developed yet, but well, actually we have one. We have an Arabic Youth League group. So we're looking at sort of piloting opportunities for how we create those affinity groups. And then of course we want to make sure we're connected to external networks as well. So this is just a little bit of a visual to see how we make sense of all the different pieces within the network. And if you have other questions about how things connect together or how to access resources, myself and Judith Mongeri, we are the community managers. So please feel free to reach out to us. We're also in the discussion group, the WORQ discussion group. So if you drop a message in there with a query about the network at large or how this fits into it, we'll be very happy to answer. And I will turn it over to, I believe, Rebecca.
I think I'm going to do some introductions.
Sorry, Nancy.
No problem. Yeah. So that's great background. So you kind of see where this group fits within the network under YouthPower 2 and the other communities of practice and working groups and so forth. So now for the kind of meat of the discussion today, I'm going to hand it over to your team that's going to be working with you all and me as well, because I'm going to be part of the group, to introduce the WORQ tool in more detail and the discussion group and expectations and objectives. So Ted Rizzo is the MEL specialist, and he's going to be the technical expert and has been supporting the development of the tool in various forms and formats. And Rebecca Pagel and Chris Ying are going to be your discussion group co-leads. Rebecca and Chris are both with the Center for Education at USAID as well. Rebecca is a senior MEL advisor and Chris is a senior data specialist. So I'm happy to turn it over to them to take us to the next steps.
Thanks, Nancy. And I think I'm starting off next. As Nancy just mentioned, my name's Ted Rizzo. I am a monitoring, evaluation, and learning specialist at Encompass LLC, where we hold the Data and Evidence for Education Programs Project, or DEEP project for short. To give a slight correction, I actually did not work on developing the Workforce Outcomes Reporting Questionnaire itself. Where I've come in to support and where DEEP has come in to support is in developing a range of supporting materials for use of the work. And we'll talk about those in a minute. This was part of a larger effort that was spearheaded by Rebecca and Chris, where DEEP, as well as YP2LE and EPIC, which I can't quite remember what EPIC stands for, all worked together to as different mechanisms to develop different supporting materials for the work. If you can move to the next slide, please, Cole. So first off, why the work, and what is the work? So the work is, or the Workforce Outcomes Reporting Questionnaire, is a standardized reporting tool that allows programs working in youth workforce development to report on indicators, e.g. 611, which is focused on income or changes in income, e.g. 612, which is focused on new employment, and ES 146, which is focused on return to education, using a standardized tool that can apply in a number of different settings. And it's been tested in a few different countries, which Rebecca will speak on later. The purpose of this tool was to really help reduce the time and cost burden of tool development for missions and implementing partners. Since there is now this standardized tool, various people can use it and access it without too many challenges. And it's meant to help level the playing field so that new and underutilized partners, particularly partners who are field-based, will be able to use the tool and not have to worry about the resource investment in developing a new tool to report on these standard indicators. And these three guiding principles really influence the full suite of resources that DEEP, EPIC, and YP2LE developed together to support the partners who are uptaking the work. So some of these things include, and I want to thank some of the people on the call who participated in a needs assessment to help us determine, develop, and shape these items. So some of the resources include a toolkit on how to use the work, which is quite intensive. A more simplified version of that toolkit focused on adapting, implementing, and analyzing the work that is really meant to speak to people at a wide range of experiences, and it can be accessed through any level of bandwidth. An interactive course on how to use the work, so covering many of those same topics, but in settings where people have more internet connectivity. It's a self-paced course that can be completed at people's own rate and discretion as different parts of it become relevant to them. There's an interactive flowchart, which we'll show you a static version of later today, that outlines what goes into the work. There's a video about using the work, which we will show you later. Some pre-programmed versions of the English version, the unadapted English version of the work that has been programmed into ODK. These can be downloaded directly from Edulinks. And it's something that we hope will help reduce the burden of access further by not requiring people to know how to program these tools and being able to use these as a platform for their adaptations and translations. And the way to do that is outlined in both the adaptation guide and in the interactive course. And then lastly, there's a very simple Excel file that we made that is designed to help partners who don't have necessary access to Stata or other statistical software to report on the standard indicators using the work. So you can take the outputs from ODK, put it directly into this Excel file, and it will calculate the indicators on behalf of partners for those who don't have the ability to do that on their own. So all of this is meant to simplify use of the work and access to the work. And we'll talk a little bit more about the different varieties of the work in a minute, because it is actually a suite of tools. Cole, if you can move to the next slide, please. So I'm going to pause from my speaking for a minute to share a video that was developed on the work. Cole is sharing the link in YouTube now. And what this video is designed to do is to give an introduction to what the work is. And we're also hoping it could be used as part of a training tool, as it gives a demonstration on how to implement the work in the field. Part of the reason this is important is because although the work is a quantitative survey, during testing of the tool, it was found to work best when implemented in the style of a semi-structured interview. And so this can be something that is a little challenging for people who are using the work initially, to sort of wrap their heads around using a different methodology than they're used to for the kind of tool that it is. So we were hoping that this would be valuable both as an introduction to that idea and as a training video. So Cole, if you can play the video, please.
The Workforce Outcomes Reporting Questionnaire, or WORQ, is a set of 4 data collection tools developed to support USAID implementing partners in reporting on youth workforce outcomes, such as new employment, earnings, and transition to further education or training. 3 of the WORQ tools, the WORQ, the Extra WORQ, and the Impact WORQ, are in-person surveys. However, USAID recommends implementing them as face-to-face, semi-structured interviews in which a data collector asks suggested prompts. Why? This allows the data collector to work with the participant to clarify their responses. During initial pilots of the WORQ tools, the tools provided more consistent or reliable data when implemented as a semi-structured interview. Here, let's watch an example of how to apply this approach using a scenario common to these 3 WORQ tools. Meet Miriam, a data collector, and David, a participant in a youth workforce development activity. David completed the program, a training on how to manage personal business finances, a few months ago, and Miriam is conducting inline data collection. Miriam has already learned that David's primary income is from self-employment in a tailoring business he started over the course of the training. Let's watch how Miriam uses prompts to clarify David's responses to a question later in the survey.
Earlier, you told me you've started to run a tailoring business out of your home, right? In a typical week, how many days do you do this work?
Oh, it depends because I also spend time helping on my family's farm. I only have time to tailor in the evenings. Some weeks, I can only work 1 or 2 days. Other weeks, 5 or 6.
Okay, so your work week changes a lot. Can you tell me how many days you worked on your tailoring business last week?
I'm not sure I remember.
That's okay. Let's talk about specific days. Do you remember working on Monday? On Tuesday?
Oh yes, I was able to work on tailoring in the evenings, Monday, Thursday, and Friday.
Was last week typical for this work?
No, last week I was very tired in the evening from planting. I can normally work a little on Tuesday or Wednesday evenings too.
So in a typical week, you work 4 or 5 days?
Yes, most weeks I work 4 days a week on tailoring.
Okay.
As we just saw, Miriam was able to use the suggested prompts to guide David to share a more accurate response. Without the prompts, she may have inaccurately reported too many or too few days based on David's initial response. For more information about the WORQ tools, including more details on implementing the WORQ, please refer to the WORQ resources page on EduLinks, which can be found at the link on your screen.
Great, thank you, Cole. And if we can go back to the PowerPoint. Oh, we are back at the PowerPoint, great.
The Workforce Outcomes Reporting Questionnaire, or
So as I mentioned before, and as we saw in the video, the WORQ is actually a suite of tools. So there are 4 tools that make up the WORQ. So there is the core WORQ. Oh, sorry, if we can move back. Thank you. There's the core WORQ, which includes all the questions necessary to report on the 3 standard indicators. So that includes the demographic questions that you'll need to disaggregate the information, questions that help determine what type of work the person's primary income comes from. So as we saw in the video, there's self-employment is one of those options. There's also wage employment, both regular and irregular, and household business. Questions on education status and questions on income at various points. So there's weekly income, there's monthly income, and the other tools, the toolkit, the adaptation guide, and the course, and the Excel calculator all help to convert and standardize those all help you with the process of converting and standardizing those payments so that you're reporting consistently for change in earnings. Then there's also the extra WORQ. The core WORQ, while it looks kind of long on paper, actually only takes about 15 minutes to implement, and we'll discuss why that is in a moment. The extra WORQ, which takes about 25 to 30 minutes to implement per respondent, provides additional background information. So there's other questions about the the person's home life. There's other questions about their employment. There's other questions about their satisfaction with the work, benefits, various information that's helpful to know but are not required for reporting on the standard indicators. And the extra work doesn't need to be implemented in full. If you're only interested in some of those questions, you can just add some of them to the work. If you are interested in all of them, you can add all of them. The impact work, which is designed for impact evaluations, and this includes the secondary source of earnings as well as the primary source of earnings. This helps for more accurate comparisons between program participant and control groups as you get a wider understanding of what their income is. And of course, you can implement both the extra work and the impact work together. And in those pre-programmed ODK tools that I mentioned before, you have all of these options. So we've pre-programmed the work, we've pre-programmed the extra work, we've pre-programmed the impact work, and we've pre-programmed the extra and impact work combined and given guidance on how to adjust those if your adaptation cuts any questions, adds any questions, and how to fit the translations in. Then lastly, there's the quick work, which is a 5-question survey that's meant to be administered over SMS. This is more useful as a monitoring tool and as something to help identify the time for when to best implement any of the other work tools in conditions where seasonal work is common. So your program ends, you know that it's an area where there's seasonal work and you're not sure when the best time to collect data is that's meaningful. You can implement the quick work, and as you see people are starting to take up employment, you know that it's the appropriate time to implement one of the other work tools. Next slide, please. So this is the static version of the interactive flowchart that I mentioned earlier. And what this is hopefully helps to demonstrate is how much of the work is skipped depending on which question path you go on. So you start off asking the demographic questions, whether people are enrolled in education or training, and then depending on their answers to their other questions, whether they're employed or not, what type of employment it is, you're funneled to ask the participant different sets of questions. So even though the work looks very long on paper, and we know this is something that people have been concerned about the possible length of the work, it actually does implement quite quickly. And this tool can be very helpful online to help you understand what the different components of the work are and what kind of information you're getting from them. Next slide, please. So I've just talked at you a lot. There's a lot of material about the work that's available on the WORQ Toolkit landing page on Edulinks, including all these materials that we discussed today. Thank you for sharing that in the chat call. So this is one of the things too that we hope can come out of this working group, which Rebecca and Chris will talk about more in a moment. These tools have been developed, but as we can get more feedback and can strengthen how to use these tools, can maybe strengthen elements of the course that are confusing or not as clear as we're hoping that there are, if there's ways that we can improve any of the reporting tools, if there's ways that we can adjust the ODK survey based on your feedback on how the work works in practice. These are all things that we're hoping to learn from this working group in addition to the experience of using the work. I'll stop now, but please feel free to ask any questions in the chat and we'll get to them later in the question and answer session. And I'll turn it over to Rebecca to discuss why a discussion group for the work.
Great, thank you, Ted. So I do want to talk a little bit about why we decided we needed a discussion group for this suite of tools. So as you can see on this slide, we did some pretty good testing on this tool before we rolled it out to all of you. So we did cognitive testing, so interviews with participants, with youth, to see if they understood the draft questions in the tool in El Salvador, in Kenya, and in the Philippines. And by the time we were done with those 3 contexts, we had a pretty solid tool. So then we did a more extensive pilot of the tool in Rwanda and Kyrgyzstan, where we did more interviews with youth or cognitive testing to make sure they understood the questions that we had written down. And then we did a typical pilot where we implemented it with youth to see, to look at the data. And we did exit interviews with those youth to find out their perception of the ease of answering the questions, or why they answered certain questions the way that they did. And we, 2 weeks later, did a follow-up where we asked the same questions again, just to check the consistency of the tool. If youth were still answering the questions the same way 2 weeks later, when we assumed nothing had changed in their employment or earning situation. So we did a lot of really, really good testing, but we know that even with the testing in those 5 different contexts, that's not enough for us to be sure that this tool works for all contexts and all people. So that is why we wanted this discussion group, because we know you all are taking this tool to different countries, different contexts, different populations, and we need to know your experiences with it so that we can continue to refine it to make it a very useful tool. Cole, you can go on to the next slide. Okay, so one of the reasons we want to keep this discussion group going is because we know that reliability and validity, which are jargony terms just to say the consistency and accuracy of the tool, those are things that will be constantly and continuously checking and improving. So we know that it's not, we've produced this tool and we know it's not, we've produced this tool and it's done, it's all good to go. We know we need to continuously learn from you and engage you in your perspectives to improve this tool. So you can go forward, Cole. Great. So there's 2 entities that we hope to bring together in this discussion group, but 2 perspectives really. The perspective of the local or implementation perspective and the global or policy perspective. So people who have this local or implementation perspective, we're looking for things like, what challenges did you anticipate for your context when you implement this tool? Or what did you learn when you asked participants if they understood the questions? Or what did you learn when you looked at earnings, for example, at one point, and then again 2 weeks later? Did people change their answers? All of those things that those of you with that implementation perspective, or who are working and living in the places where our participants are working and living, you have a really, really fine perspective on those questions. You can advance, Cole, thanks. Under the global or policy perspective, we want to be thinking, well then, given the information that's coming from the implementation perspective, how should we revise the tool to ensure accurate reporting across different contexts and activities? And what guidance should we highlight to encourage continuous adaptation and iteration with the tools? And so you can advance, Cole. We hope that this discussion group brings those 2 perspectives together. And that's not to say that only an implementer can have the implementation perspective, or only USAID can have the policy perspective, because I think most of us probably have a little bit of both. But the goal is that this discussion group brings those 2 perspectives together, and as a place where we can all talk about, well, this was my experience of this tool in the field, or as a person who lives, works, or is from a place where we're using the tool, this is how I understand this tool to work in this context. And also have the discussion of, okay, what, given our understanding of the implementation context, what guidance do we need? What revisions should we make? So this discussion group really is intended to bring all of our different perspectives together. And you can advance, Cole, and I'll hand it off to Chris, who will talk a little bit more about the discussion group itself and how you can engage in it.
Thanks, Rebecca. So to build off what Rebecca was talking about, we designed this WORQ discussion group to do a couple of different things. It's a place to create discussion in order for us to learn how the WORQ works in different contexts. strengthen our understanding of measuring youth workforce development outcomes, and hopefully improving on the WORQ suite of tools, bringing together the two perspectives that Rebecca just described, that local implementation perspective, as well as that global perspective. And again, we're hoping that the discussion group can really foster some really interesting discussion. Cole, please go ahead to the next slide. So in the discussion group, we built a number of features and activities to help us achieve that purpose. The first is exactly the online discussion group moderated by Rebecca and I as your facilitators. And I'm going to do a very brief live demo in a few minutes to show you how to interact with that online discussion group. And we have a couple of ongoing discussions already set up, or you all can create a discussion as you like. So we'll go into that in a few minutes. We've also created the space to create webinars such as this as needed to discuss particular issues raised on the discussion board or to highlight a member's experience with the work. Whether it's we identify a particular problem with the work that needs the wider group to discuss, or to highlight a success story, we really want to be able to bring everybody together to talk about that. Additionally, through youthpower.org, we can post relevant resources and events that are related to the work or measuring youth workforce development outcomes and link them to the discussion group, which is really helpful. So bringing the larger universe of events and resources to this discussion. And then finally, we built the discussion group to be welcome for everybody, regardless of your role or title, your organization, your level of experience, or your experience with the WORQ suite of tools. Anybody can participate in the working group. Cole, please go ahead, next slide, thanks. So just kind of setting, for a discussion group, kind of basic rules. One, we're inclusive. As I said before, all are welcome, doesn't matter your experience, doesn't matter your familiarity with either workforce development for youth or the work. We want you to come in, participate, ask questions, start discussions. We're excited to have anybody who would like to participate. Secondly, being collaborative. Again, really utilizing the discussion group to be collaborative, to bring in disparate points of view, different experiences, to really bolster our learning and to improve on what we've already built with the work. And then finally, to create something and create a place that's useful to everybody, whether it be us at USAID or you all who are implementing the work. We really want the discussion group to be useful. So don't hesitate to reach out to us, tell us what could be useful, and we can certainly build on what we've already built with the discussion group. Cole, please go ahead to the next slide. So I'm about to jump into the live demo and again show you how to interact with the discussion group. But before I do that, I want to invite all of you in the chat to please share your answer to the following question. What do you hope to learn from interacting with this discussion group? We really want to hear from you. I mean, we've had certain ideas and built those into the discussion group, but there's certainly space for you all to share your ideas. We'll take all of these back with us, think on them, and incorporate them into the discussion group moving forward. So with that, I am going to turn on my camera to preserve bandwidth, and I'm going to try and share my screen here so you all can see what I see. Okay. And if Cole or somebody could just confirm to me that you can see my screen.
Yep, you are all good. We can see.
Great. Thank you so much. So first things first, you want to go to youthpower.org and you'll end up at this screen. The most important thing before you can participate in the discussion group is you need to have registered with youthpower.org. So if this is your first time coming to youthpower.org, if you go see up here at the very top, you see a button register. That's where you want to click. Just give it a second to load here. This website is a little bit slow today. It's really important that you register. You'll come here, register now is where you want to click, and it will bring you to a form where you're going to need to fill out some information for your registration. Name, email address, some information about you and why you want to join. Most importantly for the discussion group, when you get down here to COP's discussion groups, it asks you to select the ones you want to join. click on the Workforce Outcomes Reporting Questionnaire working group. That's really where you want to click to signify to the moderators of the site that you want to join that working group. You click all this and you'll submit to request a new account. It's really important to note that once you do this, it's not instantaneous. It'll take 1 or 2 working days. You'll receive an email to complete your registration and then be able to log onto the site. So that again will allow you to interact with the site and most importantly, participate with the discussion group. If you've already registered on youthpower.org, you'll need to log in. You guys can all see me log in very quickly. Hopefully I remember my password. You will need, even if you've already registered with the YouthPower website, you'll need to request to join the discussion group. Just give it a second here to load. And that's very easy to do. You just click on the community and request to join. There we go. So if you're logged in and you click on communities, you'll see the Workforce Outcome Reporting Questionnaire working group. If you haven't already asked to join the group, you'll be prompted to do so. But as you can see, I'm already a part of the group. So once you've registered, once you've been requested to join the group and you've joined the working group, this is your main page to access the working group. So there are a couple of different ways to interact with this. First and foremost, we've already set up a number of discussion threads within the discussion group already. Rebecca set up a welcome thread where you can introduce yourself to the group. I've set up a couple of threads around questions around the work, if you have any, or sharing work stories. So if we click into one of these threads, we'll go into the welcome thread. You can comment directly in that thread and engage with that thread specifically. So you can see here, Rebecca's initial welcome thread here. And if you scroll down, you can type in a comment to respond to a thread, maybe introduce yourself. You can attach a file if you'd like, kind of show the comment type and save, and it will incorporate itself into this growing thread of comments against the discussion thread. And you can do that with any existing thread that's already in the discussion group. And that's certainly one way that you can interact and engage with us. If we back out to the page, another way you can interact is say that you want to start a discussion on a particular topic. If you look here on this bar here and look at add discussions and click on that and click create discussions, you can set up basically your own discussion thread. So here you fill out a short form, fill out the title of that thread, maybe enter kind of your prompt to discussion thread. Again, you can attach files. You can tag this with different topics. Again, kind of create a discussion image. And then what you want to do at the very end, and it'll say group here, you want to go through and click specifically on the Workforce Outcomes Reporting Questionnaire work group. This should already be highlighted as it is here. Once you've done all this and filled out this form, you click save, and that will create a new discussion thread which people can respond to and enter comments to. So that's another way to kind of kick off a conversation within the discussion group. We back out of that. One last way you can participate is you can add related content. And you can either link to a particular event that's related to the work or to measuring youth workforce development outcomes, or you can link to a particular resource. If you click on this add related content button and go through the prompts to create an event or create resources, it's important to note that this will create an event or resource throughout the YouthPower.org website. So it's not just limited to the working group, which has its pros and cons. The other way you can share related resources or events is just to link within a particular thread or particular discussion that you're creating. So again, it depends on kind of the nature of this. The simplest way is to just link through a discussion thread or a comment, but this is another functionality that's available to you. So that's a very, very brief kind of quick tutorial on how to engage with the discussion group. We're happy to answer more specific questions on how you do this or troubleshoot any problems you might have. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I believe I'll turn it back over to Colin.
I had to unmute myself there. Can you guys see my screen again here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So just a couple of things just to reiterate what Ted was talking about, and I'll go ahead and share the links in the chat here in just a second. Kind of some next steps for everyone joining us today is to make sure, as he said, you're registered on youthpower.org. I'll leave the registration link in there. If you're already registered, you just have to request to join the work discussion group. I placed that link in the chat already. For those of you who are already registered, you can go ahead and jump in on the discussion group there. And then once again, introduce yourself in the discussion group. Welcome. So please go ahead and introduce yourself there. And then start responding to others' discussions and consider creating your own discussion group. So with that, I will go ahead and we will move on. I want to invite all of our speakers back onto camera here so we can kind of talk about some further questions, any discussion that we want to have on kind of what you guys want to get out of this group, questions you may have about the discussion group itself or the tool, the work tool itself. I'll hand it over to Rebecca, Chris, and Ted here.
Thanks, Cole. Does anybody have any questions? You can type it in the chat, or you can come off mute and ask your question.
It looks like actually Judith already has a question in the chat. How the work tool can be used to improve on outcome results and measures gathered, making it useful in terms of project impact. Rebecca, do you want to respond to that, or?
Sure. I'm sorry, Judith. Was that your response to what you hope to learn, or was that a question for us?
Oh, yeah.
Let me come on camera. I'm not sure. First, I'm trying to understand how work works. Okay. And sort of have it's a mix of equation and just clarity from your end, since you're the experts on this. Just specifically, like after we do the questionnaire, we find, we've gotten all the reports. Okay, from the questions from the work tool. How do we use this? How do we utilize whatever that we get to improve the next project, rather than waiting and doing the same reports? How do we use this to improve? Because projects are on and on. So how can we use the tool kit, or rather work tool, to make sure that we're improving whatever that we're working on, apart from getting the same results? Thank you. I hope it's clear. I'm trying to jog around the work tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith, so much. So so why don't Ted, why don't I hand that to you to start, and then Chris and I can jump in.
Sure. So yeah, one of the ways to use the work tool, there are a number of ways you can use the work tool, both in terms of how you use it, obviously to think through your adaptation of programs after endline, so thinking about the next round of programming based on the results of the work tool, but also based a little bit, particularly if you implement the extra work at baseline, thinking through how that can inform your project moving forward. So, and I wish I'd gone back through before this meeting the scenarios that we had designed for the training course, because we do have a few specific scenarios to give examples in the course and in the adaptation guide, which I of course cannot think of for the life of me right now. But some of the specific things are in the extra work. There are some questions around, say home life, right, and thinking through like what participants dependents look like, what other forms of income are coming into the household. And while that in and of itself is not sufficient to make program design decisions, it would give you enough information to know other places you need to investigate, maybe do a needs assessment, see if people have a childcare need in order to participate in your programming, and thinking about how you could integrate that into your programming. As one potential example, there's a number of scenarios that we had outlined based on different questions, and most of them, for the most part, what the extra work can tell you then is enough information to know where you need to dig further to inform program design at the outset. And then, of course, based on the results of the work tool overall, you can look at it and say, was this program successful in doing what I hoped it would do? Did it increase employment? Did it increase people's earnings? What did it increase earnings for some groups of participants and not for others? Because of course you would disaggregate based on sex, based on age, based on disability status, and trying to understand, okay, how did this affect the program participants? How did it affect different groups of program participants? Do I need to tweak it so that it will speak better to the needs of younger girls, say, depending on what the results were? Anything to add, Rebecca or Chris?
That was really comprehensive. The only thing I'll point to is we produced something Ted mentioned earlier, a local partner adaptation guide, which is the intention behind that was to kind of streamline guidance on how to implement this and streamline it and de-jargonize it so that it could be useful to our local partners, especially as USAID tries to shift towards developing the capacity of local partners and positioning them as the owners and the leaders of development. We want to make sure that they can use the tool. So in terms of project impact, that's something I think about a lot, that the tool is simple. And Ted helped us to build a lot of tools to make it as useful as possible, so that it can be used not just by the insiders, not just by the Washington-based big NGOs, with the hope that it could be useful, sure, for our reporting up to Congress, for sure, but also to the smaller partners that a big implementer might have, to really use it to improve, to understand their outcomes, and feed that information back into their programming.
And then just one last thing to add, which I had forgotten to say during my presentation, that local adaptation guide, in addition to being written in as jargon-free English as we could get it to, has also been translated into jargon-free French or jargon-reduced French and jargon-reduced Spanish as well, to speak to a wider range of implementing partners and their partners in the field. Looks like John, your hand is up.
Hi all, yeah, thanks for this. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, Ted, you had also mentioned a training course. I was just wondering if there's a training course that goes along with the adaptation guide, or if there's any plans, or what you're referring to in terms of training around the toolkit.
Sure, I can speak to that. So the training course, I think this is one of the things that we got a sort of unintended benefit of the pandemic, in that the course had been originally envisioned as a 1 or 2 day training that was meant to be in person, and it would have been recorded, but I don't think it would have had long-term viability. But as a result of having to stay at home, we shifted the course quite a bit, and it became an online interactive course that can be completed at people's own rates of completion. So it's not a webinar. It's it's sort of an interactive online course that you can find linked on Edulinks. And what the course is it has 4 modules, one of which is focused on sort of what the work is, how you can use it, and kind of general background on the work. And then 3 modules, one specifically focused on adaptation, one focused on implementation, and one focused on analysis. And it guides you through, in each of those places, how you can do each of those things. So what you need to consider during adaptation, what you need to do, the nuts and bolts of actually going through the adaptation process. So how to use some of the other resources we built to do adaptation. So there's step-by-step instructions on how one updates an ODK file, so that you can have the translated version of the tool. Gives guidance on recommended methods for translation and adaptation. And then for, let's say, the analysis section, it gives opportunities to practice with a fake data set of work outputs to say, okay, this is how I would calculate the different indicators from this. And it gives an opportunity to practice identifying research questions that you could use the work with. So it's meant to be a very interactive, even though it's just you interacting with a computer, course with videos and other training elements. It's at the moment, it's only available in English, but it is offered in sort of a, again, try to make a simplified, dejargonized, accessible English, and it can be completed at people's time and space and pace of discretion. It's about, I think, half an hour per module, if I recall correctly, Rebecca and Chris, depending on how fast you move through it, but you can complete it at your own pace.
Great. No, that's super helpful, especially when I think working with partners to implement. That's really great. Thanks.
No problem. And as I mentioned, one of the things that I think would be great to hear from the discussion group is, how well people experience, how people experience this course, how useful it is for them, if anything needs to be tweaked, because, we developed this based on a needs assessment, which you were part of, John, if you recall, talking with partners about what you thought your needs might be for developing the these support materials, but we haven't piloted the course yet. So it'd be great to hear from people what works in it, what is unclear, and how we could adjust it to make it better.
Maybe a question around target audience, like what audience are you looking at in testing this tool? Maybe that could be helpful so we can share to our networks and,
I apologize if my audio wasn't great, but I think you were asking about the target audience of the materials we created. Okay, all right.
In order to share, I think she said, so she can properly share with networks. Yes.
Great, thank you. So Chris, why don't I hand this one to you?
Yeah. So in terms of our target audience, anybody who we're obviously targeting people who are currently implementing the work, or people who are planning to implement the work, particularly those implementers who are on USAID awards that are using the standard indicators, e.g. 611 and others that we've mentioned previously. But really, we've designed the materials and tools in the course to be more applicable than even that, to be more widely applicable to anybody who's trying to measure these types of outcomes in youth programming, or around workforce development and employment. As Ted said, we've tried to dejargonize them as much as possible to make them really simple to use. So, whether you're part of an international NGO or a local implementing partner, really, again, we want as many organizations and people as possible to be using the tool and being able to feed into the discussion to improve on those tools for the wider sector.
Great, thanks. And if there are no other questions, I mean, if there are, please feel free to share. But if not, I will very slowly hand it back to you, Cole.
Yeah. Give everyone a quick second. I don't have much more to share from my end. But if there are, as Rebecca said, any other questions, feel free to shout out now. If not, I think the guidance is clear to please join the discussion group, join YP2LE, and the majority of the work going forward, utilizing the work tool going forward, will be happening on that discussion group. So please sign up, join, and register. If you do have something that is great interest to you, start a discussion there. The discussion group, as we said, is open and will continue to grow as we kind of reach out to different communities, programs, and partners that are implementing the tool. So hopefully we'll be picking up speed, and we'll be able to have some really fruitful discussions on kind of using the tool, changing the tool as needed for context, and kind of gathering some really interesting information. But with that, if I think I don't see anything popping up in the chat here, I want to extend a big thank you to everyone today. Thank you, Ted, Rebecca, Christopher. Thank you, Nancy, Judith, Jesse, everyone who kind of joined together to kind of make this possible today. Really excited to kick off the discussion group, and we'll be seeing you guys all online. Thank you so much.